Hi, so in this video I'm going to share with you a framework for teaching speaking. First, let's have a look at some examples of frameworks. So there are lots of frameworks in language teaching, and frameworks help to give us kind of an overall structure for what we're doing when we're teaching. There are different frameworks for different skills, and there have been developments of different frameworks throughout the history of TESOL. So here are some examples. Now, interesting thing about frameworks is they're often in 3 stages. Lots of frameworks seem to have these 3 parts. So we have a beginning, a middle, and an end. That's the beginning of the lesson, the middle of the lesson, and the end of the lesson. So I've put a few examples here just to give you some ideas of different frameworks. First one in the red box is for receptive skills. So this framework is specifically for teaching listening and reading. And this framework has pre-stage, during stage, and post-stage. The main stage here is the during stage, the middle. That is the main focus where the comprehension is in this stage, in this framework. Okay, the next one, now this is probably the most famous. You've probably heard of this PPP framework, very popular. I learned about this when I did a TESOL certificate in 2005. It's very common. Most teachers are going to know this. So present, practice, produce. Now, one interesting thing about this is it's quite a deductive framework. It's not inductive, okay? It's quite explicit about what is being learned. This is a framework that focuses on grammar and speaking, and the idea is that you present the language at the beginning. That's why it's deductive. Then you have a practice stage, and then you have a production stage at the end for using the language. It's not a bad framework. It's pretty easy to understand. A lot of teachers use it, and yeah, I mean, I guess it depends how you present. You can apply this in different ways, but I would say that this framework does kind of come from a more deductive way of viewing language and language teaching. Now, what came after PPP was a swing in the other direction, communicative language teaching and task-based language teaching. In the yellow box here, you can see an example of the task-based language teaching framework. So here you have a pre-task, which is just preparation for the task. Then you have the task cycle, which means preparing for the task, doing the task, and reporting the results. And then at the end, you may have language focus depending on the way the teacher is applying this. Again, with this in the yellow, the focus is actually the middle stage, the task cycle. That's the main task focus. And there's no scaffolding in this. This is strong communicative language teaching. This goes straight from warm-up to the main communicative activity, because communicative language teaching, the strong version of communicative language teaching, focuses strongly on communication. And the language focus comes after, basically just what is needed for the learners. Okay, so for PPP, the focus is on the final stage. Okay, task-based language teaching, the focus is on the middle stage. Okay, now, so you see in the blue box, you have the deductive kind of slightly traditional way of teaching and scaffolding speaking. In the yellow box, you have a kind of more modern communicative way of teaching speaking. But I would suggest that TBLT is not always suitable for young or low-level learners. It's a good framework for teaching higher level and adults, but not always suitable for young learners. So I would say that the final framework here in the green, this is a good balance between task-based language teaching and PPP. So it has the kind of structure of PPP in that it has scaffolding, but it also has the meaning focus and the inductive perspective of teaching that you find in task-based language teaching. Okay, so the final one in the green box is encounter, internalize, and fluency, and that's what we're going to focus on in this video. So just to relate it to the other frameworks here, it kind of follows the same as PPP, okay? So the middle and the end of the lesson is scaffolding and a main speaking task. The reason how it differs is the first stage. So in PPP, the present stage is quite explicit language focus. With EIF, with the green box, the encounter stage is more inductive, meaning-focused, implicit language teaching. And you'll see why more in this video. But apart from the first stage, it kind of follows a similar pattern to PPP. It also has some similarities to the yellow box, the task-based language teaching, but the key difference here is that the task cycle is at the end of on the fluency stage, and the language focus can come in the middle. So it's kind of like task-based language teaching, but the language focus comes before the task cycle. That would be weak version of CLT. So I would say encounter, internalize, and fluency is the weak version of CLT, which means it's CLT, communicative language teaching, but it involves scaffolding. Okay, so you probably want to know more about EIF, so let's get straight into it. Okay, so this is the EIF framework. The full framework is actually ECRIF, okay? Now, this comes from, there's a website all about it, and this was developed, you can find more information on the website, ECRIF. The clarify and remember are kind of like steps at the end of the encounter stage, moving into the internalized stage. So what we've done here is kind of simplified it and just broke it down into 3 stages. So at the beginning you have the encounter stage, in the middle you have the internalized stage, and at the end you have the fluency stage. It's presented here in the triangle for various reasons. The main focus is on the F stage, unlike PDP where the main focus is on the middle during stage. The framework kind of has this triangular shape moving towards the main focus and student-centered teaching at the end. Okay, so yeah, if you want to see more about this, you can search for ecrif.com online, but I'm going to summarize a little bit about this for you in this video. So in the encounter stage, by the way, this is mainly for speaking. This is a speaking framework. So in the encounter stage, students encounter the target language, encounter the main language through an activity focused on meaning. So basically they hear the target language, but the focus is not explicitly on the language. The focus is on what it means, context of use, and setting up the whole context of the target language usage. So in the middle of this lesson, you have the internalized stage. Students internalize or memorize the target language with scaffolded practice activities. Here, there's quite a lot of steps in the internalized stage, especially if the students don't know the language, especially if they need lots of scaffolding. And in this middle stage, you can move from controlled practice towards free practice. You can also organize the target language to introduce and practice step by step. Now, the main objective of this whole framework is the end of the framework, the fluency stage. So here the students use the target language on their own in a speaking task. They become fluent in the target language. Key point here is that the task is kind of natural communication as much as possible, and students are using it from memory. They're not reading a script or a worksheet, for example. Okay, so that's an overview of EIF. Okay, so this is how it might look like in a lesson. So this is how you can organize it within a speaking lesson. In the encounter stage, of course, you want to get students' interest. Number 2, set the context. And number 3, students hear the target language with a focus on meaning. Okay, so when they understand what kind of situation we would use this language, they can hear the language maybe within a dialogue or a video, or maybe the teacher using the language. So they hear it, but their attention is focused on the meaning, not the structure. Moving through to the internalized stage, now you can teach and practice the vocabulary. Notice the vocabulary first. We don't need to ask students to start using the full expression straight away. You can check students understand the vocabulary, so you need to assess and check their progress. You can expand the target language with more controlled practice, okay, keeping it quite controlled, and then expand the target language more, moving towards free practice, which means no scaffolding and support. When students are ready, when you've scaffolded them well, you can then move on to the final fluency, which is number 8, This is your main speaking activity. It's free, it's fluency focused, kind of communicative language teaching style of activity like role play, survey, information gap. Guessing game is a good one for young learners, presentation, and so on. Okay, so the idea is you've gone from students hearing the target language to scaffolded practice to fluent usage of the target language. So let's have a look at how this might work in a practical example for young learners. So this is an example EIF lesson for young learners, and it includes a little bit about organizing target language. So the target language example here is, how old are you? I'm 8 years old. That's your target language. So what is the order of the target language to practice? Well, number one, you want to practice numbers. Okay, so numbers is your vocabulary. Number two, you need to practice the statement. Now, the reason why the statement comes before the question is because if you teach and practice the question, but you haven't taught the statement, then you can't answer the question. Okay, so that's a common way of organizing target language. You probably want to deal with the answer before you deal with the question. There are some examples where this might not be the case. There are irregularities here. But here we've got the statement first, and then number three, we practice the question form. So in this lesson, we've got the encounter stage, which is a birthday song with a teddy bear for contextualization, a puppet show to encounter the target language. Internalize has a few steps with a board game and guessing game with cartoon characters, and then finally a fluency activity, okay, to design a birthday cake and present. So let's have a look at how this would work. So we start off with the encounter stage. You have the birthday song with a teddy bear to set the context, so you listen and sing the birthday song, and then you introduce the teddy bear, and you do like a mini puppet show with the teddy bear, and everybody, you ask the teddy bear, how old are you? And the teddy bear answers to the class. You have the candles on the cake. You can change the candles to change the ages. But here mainly is the teacher modeling the target language after setting up the context of birthdays. Okay, so that's encounter. Now you move on to the internalized stage. There's a few different things you can do here. You could, of course, do a numbers game if students need that scaffolding and need that practice with numbers. If they're okay with numbers, you can go straight onto this board game idea where students go around the board game. When they land on the number, they have to say, I'm years old. So they say, I'm 7 years old, I'm 8 years old, I'm 9 years old as they're playing the game. Okay, another thing you can do, which is quite good for young learners, is a guessing game. I find this is a really nice way of encouraging communication. So let's guess about pororo and pobi and, is that petty? Okay, these three pororo characters. Okay, so let's all guess about pororo. How old are you? Okay, repeat after me. How old are you? Everybody shouts, how old are you? Okay, and then you can have some students guessing like, I'm years old, I'm years old. Let's find out. Ah, okay, repeat after me. I'm 6 years old. I'm 6 years old. Okay, now let's move on to pobi. Everybody, 1, 2, 3. How old are you? Everybody shouts. Repeat a couple of times. Get the students guessing. Let's find out. I'm 9 years old. Okay, so everybody repeat after me. And you continue this guessing game. So the idea is here is to drill the expressions, how old are you, and I'm years old. Okay, so there's some scaffolding for the internalize. Now you can move on to the fluency stage when everybody's ready. You should include some checking as well, but this is just a basic kind of lesson plan idea. Okay, so now you've got the fluency stage. So students design their birthday cake. This is age-appropriate activity. They make a birthday cake, they cut and stick the candles, and then you do like a kind of presentation, like a simple presentation. You survey everybody and you go around the class asking and answering how old you are. Okay, for young learners, EIF, the fluency stage would be very simplified and very teacher supported. For older learners would be very hands-off. The teachers wouldn't have much responsibility in this stage. Okay, so you're kind of going to change this framework depending on the learners. Okay, so I hope that's given you some ideas about EIF. If you want to find out more, have a look at that website, ecrif.com. And here I also showed you a very simple kind of example lesson to show you how the framework works in practice. Okay, so yeah, I hope that gives you some ideas about organizing your speaking lessons. Thank you.